The story begins with the beautiful town of Edda in Norway. Brothers Loritz and Magna arrive at their new home, driven by their mother, Turid. On their way, a man with one eye, called Votan, is seen struck on the road on his wheelchair, so he is helped by Magna across the road. For this kind act of Magna, he is touched on the forehead by a strange old lady called Wenche, and thunderbolts can be seen in the eyes of Magna. As Magna gets back in the car, he seems to be different. He breaks the doorknob while ascending the window of the car. He then comments that it's going to rain, and just like that, rain falls from the sky. After getting settled, our brothers arrive at school where Magna helps a new friend Isolde, fixing her bike by his exceptional new strength. Also now Magna is looking clearly without his glasses as his eyesight got better overnight. A beautiful middle-aged woman named Ran is their principal, who calls the mother of Magna for the first parent-teacher meeting. During the meeting, Magna again feels something unnatural and asks to close the window, but the principal and his mother doesn't pay attention to him much. Magna is continuously seeing signs of Norse mythology on different things like the hammer of his mother. He doesn't know what is happening with him yet. The following morning, Isolde invites Magna up to the top of the mountain for a hike. Here, during the hike, she reveals she's actually a lesbian and in love with Saxa, a girl from their class. After some time, they reach a place where they see a caution board warning them not to go ahead further, but Isolde wants to go ahead. She says that this caution board was not present last week, so it must be safe for them to go ahead. Before Magna could make up his mind, he received a message from his brother Loritz telling him that their mother's health was critical. This prompts Magna to run back home, leaving Isolde alone on the mountain. So Isolde continues her hike and sees that the glacier is melting more quickly than expected, and there she sees a tunnel exposed due to the melting of that glacier. She takes some photos of the surroundings, and as she is interested in environmental issues due to the harmful effects of the industries, she also takes some water samples from there. Then Isolde enters the tunnel in front of her, where she sees a hidden storage area owned by Judel Industries. On the other hand, Magna has reached home and realizes that his mother is quite okay. His brother Lorite joked with him by sending that message about their mother's health. After that, Magna comes out of his house and witnesses a paraglider. When he focuses on the person, he realizes that it's Isolde, and she has lost her control and is now going to strike the electricity lines. She calls Isolde to be careful, but she strikes straight into the electricity lines, and a big spark comes off. When Magna goes near to see Isolde, she is already dead. That evening, Magna is very sad about the death of Isolde. He picks up a hammer in the pouring rain and throws it into the sky in rage as electricity surges and a blackout consumes the whole town. Magna is surprised that the hammer has gone so far that he cannot even see it. The following day, we see the husband of the school principal getting out of his car on a mountain. His name is Vida, and he is the CEO of Judel Industries. He takes off his clothes and targets some reindeer wandering in a meadow. Suddenly, his eyes turn yellow, as if he is a supernatural being. He then attacks one of the reindeer and kills it with his mere hands. He also has exceptional strength and looks like he has experienced too unlikely of Magna. He then rips off the chest of the reindeer and takes its heart out. After that, Vida goes to a cliff of a mountain, looking at the sky and lake in front of him. It seems like some type of ritual as Vida is out of his clothes, and he eats the heart of the reindeer there with all the blood smashing his face and hands. The next day, Turid reaches the Judel Industries at the time when Vida has come there. Turid has got the job of accountant at Judel Industries using his past connection with Vida. They have known each other since their teenage life. Vida tells Turid that someone has vandalized his car by smashing a hammer in the front window, so he asks Turid to contact the insurance company to handle the matter. When Turid sees the picture of the smashed window, she recognizes the hammer as her own. Actually, it was Magna who threw the hammer last night, and it fell far off the car of Vida. After returning home, Turid rebukes Magna for vandalizing the car of Vida, but Magna is unable to understand how a hammer can go so far, as the car was parked in front of the house of the Jewel family, which is far away from the house of Magna. He then calculates the distance using Google Maps, which comes up to be 1.5 kilometers. So Magna was able to throw a hammer to a distance of 1.5 kilometers. At night, he buys another hammer and throws it again. He then measures the distance using his steps, and it comes out to be about 500 meters. It's much greater than the world record, so Magna is now again confused about his strength. On the other hand, Vida shares his worries with his wife about how someone can hit his car. He says that he is experiencing such a thing for the first time in his previous 1,000 years of life. His wife Ran asks him if he recently hurt anyone. To this, Vita acknowledges that he killed a girl recently who was taking a sample of water from the springs near the mountain of Judal Industries. His motive for doing so lies around hiding the bunker underground she uncovered. The next morning, a police officer comes to school and informs the students about the death of Isolde. According to her, Isolde might have been struck by lightning as the weather was bad that evening, but Magna knows that it was not the weather that caused Isolde's death. The psychologist of the school asks students if they can come to him if they feel uncomfortable after the death of their fellow. He especially points at Magna for coming to him as he had witnessed the death himself. However, Magna is interested in knowing more about Isolde's death from the police officer. He asks some questions from the police to get deeper into the matter, but in the end, he realizes that the police want to bury the case, saying it was an accident. As he is asking questions from the police officer, Ran is secretly listening to their conversation, and she is worried about the interest of Magna in the case because it can expose her husband. For now, Magna is convinced that whether the police have joined hands with Judal Industries or they are not taking the matter of the murder too seriously, so he has no hope from the police department. The following day, Jewel family members Saxa and Fjord take both the brothers Magna and Loritz with them in their car. Saxa and Fjord are brother and sister and study with Magna and Loritz. Their father Vita has assigned them to get close with Magna and know more about him. So today they are taking the both brothers with them to their home so that they can enjoy some time together. On the way, a bird crashes with the windshield of their car and Saxa and Fjord comes out of the car to check on the bird. They are pretending as if they are concerned about the bird. But when they are alone and Magna and Loritz are not seeing the both siblings, Saxa eats the bird as if she enjoys eating the living things. The Judal family is definitely something. Later that day, Magna records his running speed in a long hallway, and it again comes out to be greater than the world record. Now, Magna is more convinced that he is a special one and possesses certain powers. Being happy by this, he comes out of the building and tries to cross the road without seeing right and left. Suddenly, a heavy vehicle comes and hits him badly. Vita sees all this, and he is happy that now Magna is dead and he is safe, as Magna's curiosity about Isolde's case could have been a problem for him. But miraculously, when the doctors check on the X-ray reports of Magna, they are surprised to see that there are no fractures in the body of Magna. The doctors are very confused about how Magna can survive such a huge accident with such a huge vehicle, as there is nothing for them to do, so they discharge him soon. All the Magna's clothes are torn due to the accident, but there is not a single bruise on his body. After reaching his home, Magna sees that the coat of Isolde, which she was wearing at the time of his death, has two different smells. The sense of smell of Magna has been enhanced very much. He can sense that from inside, it's Isolde's smell, while from outside, it's some smell of the blood of someone else. So he gets very intrigued about this thing. The next day in class, Saxa invites Magna and his brother Loritz to her house again, saying it will be fun and that the whole class will be there. Magna agrees, though he's a little unsure. That evening, Magna and Loritz arrive at the Jewel family's big, fancy house. They are welcomed inside and see Ran and Vita already there, but no one else from their class has shown up, which makes Magna suspicious. Loritz, on the other hand, doesn't mind. He's excited to be in such a rich and luxurious place. The Judal family has prepared a big dinner with many different dishes. Magna and Loritz enjoy the food and are also offered some rare, expensive wine. They drink a lot and chat with Saxa and Fjord while Ran and Vita listen quietly. That evening, Vita notices that Magna doesn't seem affected at all, even after drinking so much wine. Curious, Vita steps forward and offers Magna an ancient drink called mead. He explains that their ancestors used to drink it and that it's both pleasant and special. Intrigued, Magna agrees to try it. As soon as Magna drinks the mead, something changes inside him. He feels a rush of energy and excitement. For the first time that night, he lets loose, laughing, jumping, and even dancing around the hall. The mead feels unlike anything he's ever had before, and in his excitement, he accidentally reveals a small glimpse of his incredible strength. The Judal family watches closely, their expressions shifting between amusement and curiosity. Noticing Magna's display, Ran steps forward. With a challenging smirk, she suggests they test his strength in a handshake game. Magna eagerly accepts the challenge. During the handshake game, Magna puts all his strength into defeating Ran, but Ran, who is much stronger than he expected, doesn't let him gain the upper hand. The two of them push against each other with everything they've got. Magna struggles as he is still new to his powers, while the Judal family has lived with their strengths for thousands of years. Magna's arms begin to shake with the effort. Finally, frustrated, He asks Ran who she really is. Ran doesn't answer right away. Instead, she counters who Magna is. Before Magna can respond, something strange happens. For a brief moment, Ran's face changes completely. Her features transform into something old, fierce, and terrifying, a face that looks like it belongs to a dangerous villain from ancient stories. Magna stares in shock, and he is unable to speak. Just as quickly as the change happens, Ran's face shifts back to her normal self, calm and composed, with no sign of the sinister expression he just saw. Magna is unsure if what he witnessed was real or his imagination. Magna's unease grows as he realizes there's much more to the Jewel family than he thought. Later, Magna catches a glimpse of himself in the mirror. For a split second, he's stunned. His face seems different. Hair has sprouted all over, making him look wild and beast-like. But when he blinks, the image is gone. He shakes his head, unsure if it is real or not. Back home, Magna feels restless. He opens his laptop and begins researching ancient myths and Norse mythology, hoping to make sense of everything. As he digs deeper, the pieces start to fall into place. He discovers that the glasses the Jewel family used to serve him mead match the designs used by giants in ancient times. This realization makes him think back to their incredible strength and strange behavior. Magna begins to suspect the Jewel family isn't ordinary, they are giants from the old stories. As he continues reading, Magna stumbles upon scriptures describing the god Thor. The more he reads, the more convinced he becomes that he is Thor reborn. He starts to feel that he needs a hammer as his weapon, just like Thor had. His thoughts race as he remembers the Jewel family's dog, which he now recognizes from those same ancient scriptures. His suspicions grow even stronger when he thinks about his brother, Loritz. Magna wonders if Loritz could be Loki, the trickster from the old myths. Magna sits in his room, lost in thought when a memory suddenly hits him. He remembers the moment when everything began, the day they moved to this new city. He recalls the old lady they met at the time, who touched his forehead and murmured something strange. That moment had felt unusual, but he didn't think much of it back then. Now, it feels like the key to everything. Determined to find answers, Magna visits the old lady again, working at the local general store. He confronts her, asking what she did to him that day. The old lady looks at him calmly and smiles, saying that she did nothing. She says softly that what Magna felt was always inside him. She only awakened it. Now when Magna is unable to control the power, the old lady suggests him to find the other gods. She tells him that he will meet someone on the bridge. Feeling overwhelmed by everything, Magna leaves and decides to clear his head by going for a long run through the town and the nearby forest. Meanwhile, at the Jewel family's home, tensions are rising. They now know that Magna is the god Thor, reborn, and he has come to destroy the giants. Panic and anger spread through the family. They gather their ancient weapons to kill Magna before he becomes too powerful. They believe only their old, enchanted weapons can stop a god. Vita wants to kill Magna right away, but Rand says that the time has changed and they should defeat Magna using the system. She suggests that she needs some time and then she will herself eliminate Magna by her own methods. Fjord agrees with Rand, but Saxa agrees with Vita, convinced that traditional methods are the only way to defeat Thor. The family splits into two camps, each with a different plan to deal with Magna. The next day at school, Saxa and Fjord confront Magna. They reveal that they know who he is and remind him of their centuries-long existence on Earth. They claim that no child could harm them now. Magna listens silently and then walks away, choosing not to respond for the time. Later, Magna joins his classmate GRY for a hiking trip. During the hike, he begins to notice his exceptional vision. He can see people approaching from far away and accurately describe them long before they are visible to others. GRY is surprised by his ability but dismisses it as a lucky guess. As they continue, Magna realizes his sight is sharper than ever. He notices a bird flying high overhead, far beyond what anyone else can see clearly. Yet, he can see into its eyes as if it were right in front of him. While on the mountain, Magna notices something unusual in the distance. Upon closer inspection, he finds a dead reindeer lying on the mountain. As he comes closer and examines its body, he is struck by a familiar smell, the scent of blood, the same one he had noticed on Isolde's overcoat earlier. Also, the reindeer's heart is missing, as if it had been deliberately removed. Later, Magna returns to the campsite where his classmates are gathered around. To his surprise, Vita is there as well, blending into the group effortlessly. There he asks Magna to help him prepare meat for the evening meal. So, Magna begins cutting the meat into small, precise pieces with surprising skill. Vita watches him closely and remarks on how skilled he is, almost as if he has been doing it for years. Vita then hints that he knows more about him than he might realize. He warns Magna that he and his family will not be defeated by Magna. However, Magna leaves without saying anything. Later, Vita devises a plan to kill Magna while they are still on the mountain, knowing it would be easy to make it look like an accident. To carry out the plan, he sends his dog to hunt and kill Magna. Meanwhile, Magna is watching GRY leave with Fjord for a paragliding trip. He follows them, but by the time he reaches the takeoff point, they have already left the mountain. Actually, Magna loves GRY, and he doesn't want to let GRY go into the hands of Fjord. As he turns back, he senses that someone is following him. He looks around but sees nothing at first. Suddenly, the dog lunges at him, attacking ferociously. The beast tries to overpower Magna, but he grabs a stick and forces it into the dog's mouth, using all his strength to defend himself. The fight is intense, but Magna's power proves greater. He kills the dog, tearing it apart by holding its mouth and ripping it open. Afterward, shaken and angry, Magna heads to find GRY and Fjord. When he finally tracks them down, he is met with a heartbreaking sight. They are at Judel's house, lying together, naked on the bed. Magna had feelings for GRY, but seeing her with Fjord left him hurt and silent. He decides to leave them alone and walks away. Back on the mountain, Vita finds his dog's body lying lifeless on the rocks. This sight fills him with rage. Now, he is determined to take revenge on Magna, vowing to make him pay for what he has done. In the next scene, Magna and Vita face each other in an abandoned building. The atmosphere is tense as they exchange a few words before the fight begins. Magna throws punches with all his strength, but Vita is far too experienced and agile. He dodges every attack effortlessly, smirking at Magna's attempts. Magna grows increasingly frustrated as nothing he does seems to work against Vita's overwhelming strength. Meanwhile, Fjord is given a sinister task by Vita. He is ordered to kill GRY, though Fjord also has feelings for her. Vita reminds Fjord that loving humans is not a part of the giant's nature. To prove his loyalty to the giants, Fjord must eliminate her. Fjord reluctantly agrees, but his hesitation suggests an inner conflict. Back at the fight, Magna is struggling. Vita overpowers him at every turn, leaving him on the defensive. Just when it seems that Magna has no chance, the sky begins to darken, clouds gather above the building, and Magna feels a surge of anger growing inside him. Vita taunts him further and reveals that he killed Isolde on the mountain. He says that he killed her when she was investigating the water samples from the Jewel family's mountains. Hearing this, Magna is consumed by rage, and memories of Isolde flood his mind. At that moment, lightning strikes them with a deafening crack. The force of the strike sends both Magna and Vita flying apart, each crashing to the ground. The sudden burst of power leaves them both unconscious. As Magna and Vita lie unconscious after the lightning strike, the old lady from the superstore watches from a distance. She touches her pendant and kisses it as if sending a silent message. At the same time, a bird takes flight from the area. The next season begins with rescue workers arriving at the building. They find Magna unresponsive and attempt to revive him using a defibrillator. However, as soon as they apply the electric device to his chest, the rescuer receives a powerful shock, thrown back by the lightning stored within Magna. Moments later, Magna wakes up, disoriented but alive. He turns to find Vita, who also begins to stir. Vita's yellow eyes glow fiercely as he wakes up, and without hesitation, he grabs Magna by the throat with one hand. For a moment, it seems Vita will kill him, but he releases Magna as he doesn't have those old weapons with him at the time. After that, Magna returns home and decides to confide in his brother, Loritz. He reveals his belief that he is Thor and suggests that Loritz might be Loki. Loritz initially dismisses the idea, laughing at Magna's claim. To prove his point, Magna picks up an iron baseball bat and bends it effortlessly in front of him. Loritz, shocked and speechless, begins to reconsider, though he doesn't fully accept the truth yet. Later that day, Magna meets a girl named Iman on a bridge. She seems mysterious and familiar, as if connected to the prophecy mentioned by the old woman earlier. So Magna takes Iman with him to his house. Magna asks Iman about her strengths, suspecting she has abilities similar to his own. However, Iman insists that she has no remarkable powers other than her charm and the ease with which she can convince people. Magna suggests that her strength must be something deeper, and she should focus on finding those strengths. Later that day, at a party meeting, Iman begins to suspect that Magna might be right. She decides to test her abilities. Making eye contact with a nearby boy, She calmly instructs him to bring a glass of wine for her on his knees. To Magna's surprise, the boy follows her command without hesitation, as though compelled by some invisible force. Iman, realizing what she has just done, tells Magna that she has discovered her strength now. She explains that her power seems to lie in her ability to influence others, bending their will to match her own. The next day, Magna takes him on to a nearby workshop with a plan to have a hammer crafted. He explains to the workshop owner that he needs a hammer forged from metal, showing him a rough sketch of the design. Initially, the man refuses, stating that he doesn't create weapons. However, Iman steps in, locking eyes with the man and speaking calmly. Under her influence, the man quickly changes his mind and agrees to make the hammer for Magna. He promises that it will be ready by the following day. Meanwhile, Loritz becomes skeptical about the whole idea of his existence. He questions how he is so different from his brother Magna in genetics. He also expresses these concerns to his mother. The scene shifts to Turid, who visits Vida at Judel Industries where she also works. However, the conversation of Turid with Veda soon turns personal. Turid hesitatingly reveals a long-buried secret to Vida. Loritz is actually his son. She explains that years ago when they were teenagers, they hooked up at a party. Not long after, Vida disappeared from her life, unaware that Turid was pregnant. Left to handle the situation on her own, Turid decided to raise Loritz as her son, keeping his true parentage a secret. Turid explains that Loritz has always felt different, and lately, he has been expressing that he doesn't feel like his brother, Magna. This difference has troubled Loritz deeply, and Turid believes Vida deserves to know the truth. Vida, stunned by the revelation, remains silent. Vida, instead of feeling regret or guilt, becomes happy by Turid's revelation. He realizes this is an unexpected advantage to having someone from his own bloodline within the camp of his enemy. He starts devising ways to manipulate Loritz, hoping to turn him against Magna. Later that night, when Magna returns home, he is startled to see Vida leaving their house. Vida shares a warm hug with Loritz before departing. The bond between Vida and Loritz appears to have already begun forming, and it unsettles Magna. Loritz also seems genuinely happy to be receiving attention and affection from Vida. The next day, Magna receives his hammer from the workshop. Excited to test it, he heads to a secluded area to practice. He knows that Thor's hammer should return to Thor when thrown away, but things don't go as planned. When Magna throws the hammer, it soars far away and doesn't come back. He tries several times to call it back but fails. Realizing something is off, Magna and Iman go to retrieve the hammer. Magna begins to suspect that the hammer is either not fully ready or hasn't been activated by his powers. Seeking answers, he decides to consult the old woman who gave him the prophecy about being Thor. When Magna meets the old woman, she seems nervous and alert. Unknown to Magna, someone is secretly watching them from a distance. The old woman notices the spy and becomes worried. She warns Magna that it's not safe for them to meet like this and urges him to leave immediately. Before parting, she gives him a designated location and time for their next meeting, promising to explain everything about the hammer there. The scene shifts to the Jewel family home, where Loritz is now sitting with his father, Vidar. Vidar, wanting to solidify their bond and bring Loritz fully into his team, offers him a cup of mead again, a drink laced with ancient power. Vidar then reveals the heart of a reindeer, which is an ancient and sacred offering. He explains to Loritz that eating the heart of reindeer will awaken his dormant giant blood and grant him the strength and immortality like that of Judel family. Though hesitant at first, Loritz gives in, and he eats the heart. Suddenly, he feels an immediate surge of power coursing through his body. To test his transformation, Vidar holds Loritz's hand over a roaring fire. At first, Loritz feels the sharp pain of the flames, but his wounds quickly heal before his eyes, a clear sign that his body has become invincible like the other giants. Vidar, pleased with the outcome, informs Loritz that he now possesses eternal life and will no longer age or die like ordinary humans. Loritz begins to embrace his newfound identity. The questions about who he truly is now have answers, and he feels content with his new self. When he returns home, he shares everything about the Jewel family with Magna. He tells Magna about Vidar's plans, his transformation, and how the Jewel family is targeting the old lady who had given Magna the prophecy. Hearing this, Magna quickly understands that the old lady is in danger because of her connection to him. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to Ran, who has tracked down the old lady. The old woman, sensing danger, kisses her pendant and transforms into a bird to escape. However, Ran, an expert archer, fires an arrow with precision. The arrow strikes the bird mid-flight, and it falls to the ground, transforming back into the old lady, seriously injured. The old lady musters her remaining strength and crawls to a nearby house. There, she finds an old man in a wheelchair and hands him her pendant. With her last words, she urges him to help Magna fulfill his destiny and truly become Thor. Moments later, her body turns into ashes, leaving nothing but a pile of sand. Magna arrives just as the old lady breathes her last. He kneels by her ashes, devastated that he couldn't save her. The scene shifts to the old man who has received the pendant from the dying woman. Though confined to a wheelchair and unable to walk, as soon as he holds the pendant, a transformation occurs. The pendant's mystical power courses through him, and the man rises to his feet unaided. It is revealed that this pendant has granted him immense supernatural strength, making him the king of the gods, Odin. Meanwhile, Magna returns home, where Loritz is eager to demonstrate his newfound abilities. Loritz grabs a screwdriver, stabs it into his own hand, and pulls it out. To Magna's shock, the wound heals instantly, leaving no trace of injury. Loritz appears proud of his transformation, but Magna is deeply worried. Despite his unease, Magna knows that the ancient texts have foretold this. Loritz is Loki, the god of mischief, destined to play a significant role in the future. Though Magna dislikes what his brother has become, he cannot deny the truth of the prophecy and the weight of their destinies. The following day, Magna visits the old man who now wields the power of the mystical pendant. The old man tells Magna that they must locate the other gods scattered among humanity. They need to unite and form a team strong enough to stand against the giants, who hold control over the city and pose an imminent threat to humanity. The battle ahead is not just about survival but about ensuring the safety of mankind from the destruction of the giants. As the old man speaks, Loritz enters the room. The old man immediately recognizes his presence and grows cautious. He knows all too well the nature of Loki, the god of mischief. Betrayal and deception are part of Loki's essence, making him a dangerous liability to their cause. Without hesitation, the old man tells Loritz he must leave, as he cannot be trusted and is not truly one of them. That's why Loritz reluctantly steps out, leaving Magna and the old man to discuss their plans for the future. After being dismissed from the room, Loritz wanders into the hospital. He notices a nurse carefully arranging blood samples of various patients, including that of the old man who holds the pendant's power. Loritz approaches the nurse with a fabricated story, sending her off on an errand. With the area now clear, he swiftly takes the old man's blood sample, and without hesitation, Loritz injects the old man's blood into his own veins, hoping to absorb its mystical properties. As the blood courses through his system, an unsettling transformation begins. He feels a surge of energy. Loritz becomes something entirely new, a hybrid of god, giant, and mortal. Later, we see a public protest take place, with crowds gathering to denounce Judel Industries for poisoning the region's drinking water. The scene is chaotic, with chants and banners filling the area. Amid the uproar, Loritz sneaks into Vita's vehicle, making his allegiance clear by flipping off Magna and the rest of the gods' team. His frustration with being excluded from their plans drives him to side with the giants. Upon arriving at the Judel estate, Vita welcomes Loritz with a smile, sensing. He leads Loritz to a hidden chamber, where ancient sculptures, ornate monuments, and weaponry from ages past are displayed. The room gives a sense of timelessness, heavy with history. Vita explains that these relics belong to the giants, who have ruled the earth for thousands of years. Loritz questions how the giants managed to live for so long without showing their age. In response, Vita reveals his true face, which is wrinkled and weathered, bearing the weight of centuries. So he too gets old, but he has hidden his old worn-out face behind a young mask. As Loritz marvels at the power of the giants, Vita's tone shifts. He ominously warns that while Loritz's hybrid nature grants him strength, it also makes him a liability. Vita cannot tolerate the presence of a half-giant, half-god in his ranks, fearing betrayal. That's why he is going to kill Loritz. Just as Vita raises an ancient blade to strike, Magna bursts in to protect his brother. The clash between Magna and Vita shakes the room. Vita's strength as a giant is overwhelming, and for a moment, it seems like Magna might lose. But Magna's determination to save Loritz fuels him, and he strikes back with all his might. In the midst of their fierce battle, Magna notices the old axe hanging on the wall, which is a weapon of the giants. Realizing its potential, he pushes Vita toward it. Finally, Magna forces Vita backward, causing him to stumble onto the axe. The ancient weapon pierces Vita's chest, and Vita lets out a deafening roar as his body begins to disintegrate. As the ashes of Vita settle, Magna knows this is just the beginning. The Judel family will not take Vita's death lightly. The next day, Loritz experiences severe pain in his abdomen, which starts swelling unnaturally. Worried about this, he visits the hospital, where the doctors perform an ultrasound. To their shock, they discover an enormous tapeworm-like creature inside him unlike anything they've ever encountered. They decide to perform emergency surgery to remove the creature. After the successful operation, the doctors are both relieved and curious. One of them approaches Loritz, asking for permission to send the creature to a lab for further study, as its size and nature defy all medical norms. However, the doctor also informs Loritz that the worm is still alive, which is very unnatural. Loritz realizes that it is not an ordinary worm but the offspring of Loki, which is a serpent-like entity tied to Asgardian myths. Meanwhile, Magna attends Vita's funeral, where mourners solemnly pay their respects. As the ceremony progresses, the weather abruptly shifts. Dark clouds gather, and a sudden bolt of lightning strikes the building, shattering a large window. Recognizing the unnatural phenomenon as a sign, Magna leaves the funeral and comes out in the nature. Standing at the edge of a towering mountain cliff, Magna yells with all his strength. He is overwhelmed with anguish and wants answers from the forces that chose him. He cries out for guidance, for his hammer to work, and for a clear direction in this increasingly chaotic world. Also, the guilt weighs heavily on him as he wrestles with the reality of having killed Vita, who was the father of his brother, Loritz. Magna questions whether he is worthy of this path, uncertain if he can continue bearing the burden of his destiny. And then he starts yelling that he doesn't want all these powers and he just wants to be an ordinary person. Meanwhile, tensions rise between Fjord and GRY, who have been living together yet, but now they have a heated argument. GRY expresses her desire to leave Edda and start fresh elsewhere. However, Fjord refuses to abandon his home. With Vita gone, he feels a deep sense of responsibility to take over his father's role and uphold the Jewel family's legacy. So, he distances himself from GRY. This marks Fjord's transformation into the main villain of the story. After that, Fjord goes towards the wilderness where an ancient weapon is hidden. Fjord picks up the weapon as he wants it to take revenge for his father now. Then he goes to the same cliff where Vita used to go for sacrifices. There, Fjord now vows to avenge Vita, no matter the cost. He now fully embraces his role as the leader of the Judel family and the inheritor of their ancient mission. From the next day, we see that Magna is now powerless and struggling to adapt to his old normal life. He needs glasses to see clearly again, and his clumsiness often leads to accidents, like falling from stairs, emphasizing his transformation back into an ordinary person. That day, Magna's mother, Turid, is informed that she's been dismissed from her job at Judel Industries. This is due to Fjord's takeover of the company after his father's death, leaving him in control of all major decisions. Turid is devastated by the loss of her job and is uncertain about what the future holds for her. Magna, enraged by the situation and his mother's distress, confronts Fjord. However, stripped of his powers, Magna feels helpless and vulnerable. Fjord easily overpowers him and throws his glasses away, mocking his fragility. Fjord then says that his father had been poor at making decisions, which ultimately led to this downfall. As now he is the in charge, so he will decide who will stay at the industries. Back at home, Magna notices something strange in a glass container. Upon closer inspection, he realizes that it's the same tapeworm that was once removed from Loritz's abdomen. However, this tapeworm seems to have grown a bit. It now appears larger and more dangerous, almost as if it has evolved or mutated in some way. Later, Magna approaches the old man, with the pendant in his possession. Desperate to regain his powers, Magna pleads for Odin's help. Odin listens carefully and then tells him that Magna needs to make the Hammer of Thor in the Eternal Fire to get his powers back. To restore the Hammer of Thor and unlock his full potential, they must first locate the Eternal Fire, an ancient, mystical flame capable of forging divine weapons. But this task cannot be completed without the aid of a dwarf, as dwarfs were the master weaponsmiths in the ancient times who forged tools of gods. Magnus sets out determined to reclaim his power by forging the Hammer of Thor. He gathers his team and heads to Judel Industries, aware that the Eternal Fire burns beneath its foundations. After sneaking into the industries, the group makes their way to the basement, where they find the Eternal Fire. Following the ancient scriptures, they gather the required materials, each symbolizing strength, resilience, and divinity. Dwarf steps forward, to assist them. Under the heat of the Eternal Fire, the the hammer is forged. Magna holds the hammer, feeling its weight and energy. The following day, Magna eagerly tests the newly forged hammer, hoping to feel the full extent of his powers returning. However, when he throws it with all his might, the hammer barely travels a few feet before landing on the ground. Confused and frustrated, Magna tries again and again, but the results remain the same. Each failed attempt takes away his confidence, and in a moment of despair, he yells at why his powers haven't returned yet. Disheartened, Magna returns home and turns on the television, only to see Fjord addressing the media. Fjord smugly announces that he has officially taken charge of Judel Industries. He dismisses all claims by environmentalists about the company poisoning the environment, calling them baseless and politically motivated. To add to the gods' despair, Fjord reveals his plans to expand Judel Industries' operations. For Magna, it feels like the defeat of the gods and the triumph of the giants. Later that night, the weather grew intense, with dark clouds spreading across the sky and heavy winds picking up. Magna realizes that it is a sign from nature, so he grabs his hammer and steps outside. Looking up, he sees lightning flashing furiously across the sky. Understanding what he needs to do, he raises the hammer toward the heavens. Suddenly, a brilliant bolt of lightning struck the hammer, illuminating the surroundings. The strike seemed to awaken the hammer. Magna also feels a surge of strength, realizing that his powers has returned. Meanwhile, at the Judel household, Fjord is confronting Saxa because she wants half of the Judel businesses for herself. That's why he beats her and confines her within the house as punishment. After some time, Magna arrives at the Judel house. Inside, he found Saxa sitting alone and wounded. She begins speaking to him and tries to persuade him that together, they could rule the world. Saxa argues that, with her ability to influence people and control narratives, combined with Magna's immense strength, they could achieve anything. However, her true intentions become evident when she suddenly lunges for Magna's hammer. Prepared for her move, Magna swiftly catches her mid-action and pins her to the ground, preventing her from taking the weapon. However, their close proximity lead to a romantic moment, and they end up kissing passionately. After that, they became intimate. However, this was all part of Saxa's plan. Her primary goal was to keep Magna distracted while Fjord and Rand carried out their mission to kill Loritz. Meanwhile, at Loritz's location, Fjord and Rand confronts him with the intent to end his life. However, Loritz quickly devises a strategy to save himself. He proposes a deal, claiming he knows a way to kill Magna and could assist them if they spare his life. The two giants pause, intrigued by his offer, and begin considering whether his words hold any value. On the other hand, Magna soon realizes that he has left Loritz alone at home and that Fjord and Rand are not at their home too, which raises his suspicions. So he rushes back to his house, only to find Fjord and Rand sitting in their car. Filled with anger, he assumed they had already killed his brother. In a fit of rage, Magna hurls his hammer at their vehicle, splitting it in two. However, just then, Magna hears Loritz's voice. Loritz is still alive, though he is injured. Overwhelmed with relief, Magna immediately runs to his brother to support him. A few days later, Loritz is seen standing by a large water body. He is holding his offspring, the monstrous worm he had nurtured since its removal from his abdomen. After a heartfelt kiss to the worm, he releases the worm into the water. He has promised the giants to let the creature grow until it is powerful enough to kill Magna. After all, only a worm of Asgard could destroy Thor. Also, the giants are looking at him from a distance,